I never imagined my life could flip upside down in just a few weeks. My wife, Emily, had been talking about this girl's vacation for months. She said she needed time to relax, unwind, and catch up with her best friend, Claire. I trusted her completely. I mean, we'd been married for 7 years, and I thought our bond was unshakable. She left with a smile, suitcase in hand, and a promise that she'd come back refreshed. I stayed home, taking care of our house, working, and counting down the days until she returned. But when she finally walked through the door, something about her was different. Her face seemed pale, almost stiff, as if she had seen a ghost. She hugged me quickly, avoiding my eyes. And that's when I noticed her hand resting protectively over her stomach. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired from the trip. Maybe I was imagining things. But deep down, I felt something was wrong, terribly wrong. And I had no idea that the truth would not only break my heart but also test the very limits of what I thought I was capable of. Over the next few days, Emily's behavior grew stranger. She avoided long conversations, went to bed earlier than usual, and whenever I asked about her trip, she gave me vague, one-sentence answers. Yeah, it was fine. Relaxing. Claire and I just talked a lot. But her eyes told a different story. They darted away every time I looked at her. One night, as she was showering, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't even think about checking her messages. I trusted her. But something in my gut told me I needed to look. The screen lit up with a name I knew all too well, Daniel. Daniel was Claire's husband. My wife's best friend's husband. My hands shook as I opened the message. Asterisk, we need to talk about what happened. She's starting to suspect something. Asterisk. I felt my chest tighten, my stomach drop. What happened? And why would Claire be the one suspecting? That was the first moment I realized the vacation wasn't just about relaxing. Something had happened between Emily and Daniel. Something they were desperately trying to hide. And I knew, I had to find out the truth before it destroyed me completely. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake replaying every moment in my head, her stiff smile, the way she guarded her stomach, Daniel's cryptic text. My thoughts twisted into a storm I couldn't escape. By morning, I had a plan. I wasn't going to accuse her outright, I wanted the truth to spill from her own lips. So over breakfast, I casually asked, "So, what did you and Claire do most of the time on your trip?" Emily froze mid-bite. Her fork hovered over her plate, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Just, girl stuff. Shopping, relaxing by the pool. Her voice was too flat. Too rehearsed. I leaned back in my chair, watching her carefully. Funny, I said slowly, because Daniel texted you last night. Something about what happened. Her eyes widened. For the first time since she came home, she looked straight at me. Her face went pale, her hands trembling slightly as she set the fork down. "Why were you looking at my phone?" she whispered. "That's not the question," I shot back, my voice firm. "The question is, what happened between you and him?" Silence filled the room. Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. She just sat there, frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. And in that silence, I already knew the answer. Emily's fingers gripped the edge of the table as if it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. Her lips trembled, but when she finally spoke, her words were shaky and uneven. It was a mistake," she whispered, barely audible. My chest tightened. "A mistake?" I repeated, forcing myself to stay calm even as my heart pounded. "What kind of mistake involves Daniel?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she finally broke. "It wasn't supposed to happen. Claire went to bed early one night, and Daniel and I stayed up talking. I was upset, I'd had too much to drink, and..." "Stop. My voice was sharp enough to cut through her excuses. I didn't want details. I didn't need them. The image in my head was already too painful. Her face crumpled as she tried to reach for my hand. I regret it, every second of it. I didn't mean to betray you, I didn't mean to hurt you. I pulled my hand away. The sight of her crying didn't move me this time. My mind was already racing to the bigger question, the one that had haunted me since she came back. I looked straight at her and asked, "Emily, is the baby his?" Her eyes widened. She froze completely. No tears, no excuses, no movement. Just silence. And that silence told me more than any confession ever could. The silence stretched between us like a wall. Emily's eyes darted back and forth, as if she was searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Finally, she whispered, I don't know. My stomach twisted. You don't know? I repeated, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. You're telling me you don't even know whose child this is? She covered her face with her hands, sobbing into them. It only happened once, I swear. But the timing. I can't be sure. I stood up from the table, pacing the room as anger and heartbreak collided inside me. The woman I thought I knew, the one I trusted with everything, had shattered our marriage with one decision, and now she was carrying the evidence inside her. When I finally stopped pacing, I looked at her with cold clarity. If you think I'm going to sit here and just guess whether I'm the father of that child, you're wrong. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face full of fear. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, my decision already made. We're getting a test. And if that child isn't mine, I paused, my voice low but firm, then everything changes. Emily's face went pale again. She froze, unable to speak. She knew I wasn't bluffing. The next few days were unbearable. Emily moved around the house like a shadow, quiet, distant, her eyes red from crying. I couldn't even look at her without feeling a storm of rage and heartbreak twisting in my chest. Every time I saw her hand rest protectively on her stomach, it felt like a knife turning deeper. Was she carrying my child, or Daniel's? The uncertainty was eating me alive. Finally, I made the appointment. When I told her, she just nodded, her lips trembling, but she didn't argue. Maybe she knew this was the only way forward. At the clinic, the air was thick with tension. We didn't hold hands, didn't speak. We just sat in silence, waiting to be called. When the nurse finally led us inside and explained the process, I kept my eyes fixed on the floor. Emily tried to say something, I'm sorry. I wish I could take it back, but I didn't respond. My heart was frozen. The samples were taken. The nurse told us the results would be ready in a couple of weeks. As we left, Emily's hand brushed against mine, but I pulled away. Don't, I said quietly. Not until we know the truth. She froze, her face crumbling, but she said nothing. And as we drove home in silence, one thought kept pounding in my head, what if the test proves everything I fear? The waiting was worse than anything I had ever experienced. 2 weeks felt like 2 years. Every day, the weight of not knowing crushed me a little more. Emily tried to act normal. She cooked dinner, folded laundry, even smiled at me once or twice, as if pretending things were fine would erase what had happened. But every smile looked forced, every gesture hollow. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while she turned restlessly beside me. Sometimes I could hear her quietly crying into the pillow, but I never reached out. Part of me still wanted to comfort her, but another part screamed that she didn't deserve it. One evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, a message came in, from an unknown number. My heart skipped when I read it. Asterisk, you deserve to know the truth. Emily and Daniel weren't as careful as they said. Ask Daniel yourself. Asterisk. No name, no explanation. Just that. I stared at the message for a long time, my mind racing. Someone else knew. Someone wanted me to dig deeper. I glanced at Emily in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup with that same distant look on her face. For the first time, I wondered, was the test even necessary? Or had the truth already been handed to me? But deep down, I knew, the real storm hadn't even begun. I couldn't get that anonymous message out of my head. Who sent it? Why now? And more importantly, what exactly did they know? By the next morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait around in silence while my life unraveled. I needed answers, and there was only one person besides Emily who could give them to me, Daniel. I drove to his house unannounced. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I finally pulled up, Claire's car was gone. It was just him. Daniel opened the door with a surprised look that quickly turned into unease when he saw my face. Hey, what's up? I didn't waste time. Cut the act. I know what happened on that trip. Emily told me enough. Now I want to hear it from you. His jaw tightened. He tried to laugh it off, but his eyes betrayed him. Man, it was nothing, just. Don't, I snapped, stepping closer. I'm not here for excuses. I want the truth. Is there a chance the baby is yours? His face went pale. For a long moment, he just stared at me, lips pressed in a tight line. Then he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I didn't mean for it to happen, he muttered. It was one night. But yeah, there's a chance. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. And in that moment, standing on his doorstep, I realized this wasn't just about Emily anymore. Their secret had dragged all of us into a disaster that none of us could escape. I stood there on Daniel's porch, my blood boiling. His half-hearted confession echoed in my ears, but before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the air. What chance? What are you two talking about? I turned, and there she was, Claire. She had just pulled into the driveway, grocery bags in her hands, frozen in place as she stared at us. Daniel's face drained of all color. Claire, it's not. But she didn't let him finish. The bag slipped from her hands, crashing onto the pavement as she pieced it together in real time. Her best friend. Her husband. The secret trip. The silence. Her eyes filled with fury. Don't you dare tell me it's not what it looks like, she screamed. I knew something was wrong. I asked you both, and you lied straight to my face. I stood frozen, torn between my own rage and the chaos unfolding in front of me. Claire's gaze shifted to me, her voice breaking. And you knew too. I swallowed hard. I found out after. Emily admitted it. That's why I'm here. Claire covered her mouth, shaking her head as tears streamed down her cheeks. She turned to Daniel, her voice trembling with disgust. You didn't just betray me, you destroyed two families. Daniel reached for her, but she shoved him back. Don't touch me. The scene was spiraling into pure disaster, and I realized there was no undoing this. The truth was out now, not just between me and Emily, but between all four of us. And whatever the test results said, nothing would ever be the same again. The days after that confrontation felt like living in the wreckage of an explosion. Claire cut off all contact with Emily, and I couldn't blame her. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was Daniel or Emily trying to do damage control, but I didn't want to hear excuses anymore. Emily, on the other hand, moved through the house like a ghost. She tried speaking to me, tried to explain again, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. The image of her and Daniel together burned in my mind, and no apology could erase it. Then, one morning, the envelope finally arrived. My hands trembled as I tore it open, the paper shaking between my fingers. Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table, her face pale, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I read the words once. Twice. My vision blurred as the reality sank in. Emily's voice cracked. What does it say? I lowered the paper slowly, staring at her with a mix of anger and heartbreak. The silence stretched on until she couldn't take it anymore. Tell me, she begged, tears streaming down her cheeks. I finally spoke, my voice cold and steady. It says I'm not the father. Emily froze. She looked like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Her body trembled as if the weight of the truth had just crushed her completely. And in that moment, I realized the test hadn't just confirmed my worst fear, it had ended everything we once had. Emily's face crumbled the moment the words left my mouth. She buried her head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking with each breath. I ruined everything, she cried. Please, please don't leave me. I made a mistake, but I love you. I'll do anything to fix this. Her words were desperate, but to me they sounded hollow. The woman who once promised me loyalty had chosen another man, and now the proof of that betrayal was growing inside her. I stood up, folding the paper back into the envelope with steady hands. Love doesn't look like what you did, Emily. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed our marriage, our trust, everything we built together. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing my arm. We can get through this. We can raise the baby together, start over. I pulled my arm free, my eyes cold. Raise his child? After what you did? No. That's not my burden to carry. Her sobs grew louder as she dropped to her knees, clinging to the edge of my shirt like a drowning person. But I had already made up my mind. I walked away, leaving her on the kitchen floor, her pleas echoing behind me. And though my heart shattered with every step, I knew one thing for certain, my silence, my leaving, would speak louder than any words ever could. I packed a bag that night. Not the whole closet, not everything I owned, just enough to get away. The house felt heavy, suffocating, like every wall was closing in on me with memories of what once was. Emily sat on the couch, her face red and swollen from crying. Please, she whispered as I walked past her. Don't do this. We can fix it. Don't throw everything away. I paused at the door, gripping the handle so tightly my knuckles ached. I didn't throw it away, Emily. You did. Her sobs filled the silence as I stepped out into the night. For a few days, I stayed at a hotel, trying to clear my head. But as fate would have it, I wasn't the only one whose life had been turned upside down. Claire called me. Her voice was sharp, brittle. So, it's true, isn't it? The baby isn't yours. I swallowed hard. Yeah. The test confirmed it. There was a pause on the line before she let out a bitter laugh. Daniel admitted it too. He swore it was a mistake, but how do you make a mistake that ruins two marriages? Her words cut deep because they mirrored my own thoughts. Two lives destroyed. Two families shattered. All because of one reckless night. And as I hung up the phone, a realization hit me, maybe the real ending wasn't just about what Emily did. Maybe it was about what I would do next. A week later, I sat in a lawyer's office with a stack of papers in front of me. My hands hovered over the pen for a long moment before I finally signed my name. Divorce. A word I never thought would be a part of my life, but now it felt like the only path to freedom. When I returned to the house to collect more of my things, Emily was waiting. Her eyes were tired, her body already showing signs of the pregnancy. She looked broken, but I had no sympathy left to give. Is this really it? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. I placed the envelope of papers on the table between us. It's over, Emily. There's no fixing this. You chose him, whether you meant to or not. And I won't spend the rest of my life raising the proof of your betrayal. She broke down again, but I turned and walked out. This time, I didn't look back. As I carried my boxes to the car, a familiar vehicle pulled up. Claire stepped out, her expression just as weary as mine. For a moment, we just stood there in silence, two people bound together by pain neither of us asked for. Finally, she spoke. "Looks like both our lives just got rewritten." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, but maybe that's not the worst thing." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't felt since before the nightmare began: hope. Because even in the wreckage, sometimes endings are just the beginning of something new. Life after betrayal isn't simple. The papers were signed, the house no longer felt like home, and the future I once imagined with Emily was gone forever. But strangely, I didn't feel empty, I felt lighter. Emily kept trying to reach out in the weeks that followed, leaving voicemails filled with tears and apologies, but I never answered. There was nothing left to say. Her choices had written the ending long before I picked up the pen. Claire and I crossed paths a few more times, mostly by accident, at the grocery store, once outside the lawyer's office. Each time, there was no bitterness between us, just quiet understanding. We were two people who had been collateral damage in someone else's mistake, trying to rebuild from the ruins. One evening, as I sat alone in my new apartment, I looked around at the bare walls and the single suitcase that now held my life. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Betrayal had broken me, but it had also forced me to grow stronger. I had faced the truth, survived the lies, and walked away with my dignity intact. And as I closed my eyes that night, I realized something important: sometimes the most painful endings are the ones that finally set us free. Months passed, and the chaos slowly faded into the background of my life. What once felt like an open wound had become a scar, visible, but no longer bleeding. Emily eventually moved away. I heard through mutual friends that she was raising the baby alone. Daniel's marriage to Claire collapsed completely, and he wasn't in the picture much either. Their choices had cost them everything. As for me, I learned something vital: healing doesn't come all at once. Some days, I still felt anger. Other days, sadness. But with time, both began to fade, replaced by something far more powerful: clarity. One afternoon, I bumped into Claire again at a small cafe. This time, there was no tension, no shadow of betrayal hovering between us. She smiled gently, and I found myself smiling back. Two people who had been broken by the same storm, and yet, somehow, were still standing. We didn't rush into anything. We didn't need to. Just knowing that someone else understood, without explanation, was enough. As I left the cafe that day, I realized my story wasn't one of loss, it was one of survival. My wife's betrayal had ended our marriage, but it hadn't ended me. In fact, it had forced me to rise, to let go of what was destroying me, and to open myself to the possibility of something better. Because in the end, betrayal didn't define my future. Strength did.